influence and the greatest authority in every sporting decision, inside and out. And Gazidis, Arsenal CEO at the time, made a formal call to his counterpart, Manchester City FC, Ziggy Gerstein. The conversation was short and terse, as one English source describes it, centering on just one point: Mikel Arteta. Evan, without any vulgar introductions, informed Manchester City officials of Arsenal's keenness to hold talks with Mikel Arteta as soon as possible, accompanied by his lawyer and his agent, in preparation for his assumption of the position of coach in the London club to succeed Arsene Wenger. Such news was not surprising in the City camp, as they were already aware of the holding of semi-informal weekly meetings between mediators appointed by Arsenal and Mr. Inaki Ibinith, Arteta's business manager. Later that day, Kiki Bjerstein invited Pep Guardiola and Mikel Arteta to a behind-closed-door meeting to discuss Arsenal's bid, which was approved after a tug-of-war. In light of Pep's initial reluctance to leave his faithful assistant and the man he sees as his third eye, the parties later reached a conviction requiring that Michael be allowed to explore other horizons in a different role in which the spotlight of the increasing pressures placed on his shoulders would ensure that he honed his talent and raised his level of experience. But all of this is conditional on his return in the future to become one day first coach in Manchester City. On the eve of the 18th of May, Ivan Gazidis, Raul Sanllehi and 7 Milita hosted Mikel Arteta in London Hotel, and the parties were all involved in talks that lasted for more than 3 hours and 40 minutes. The discussion revolved in a detailed and accurate way about Mikel's ideas and plans for the next season and how he can develop the current squads of players, raise their levels, sharpen their motivation, and take them to compete on various fronts. The impression was good in general, but what was disturbed by 3 points. The first is the contracts, as Arteta, despite his acceptance of working under a poor budget compared to the rest of the elite clubs, but he rejected the idea of the club dictating to him players he did not choose or follow in the first place. The second point was the lack of a ready assistant coaching staff and the need for the club or Mikel for a relatively short period of time to bring in individuals and agree on their roles and powers. Third, Arteta does not have practical experience in the world of coaching, and all he has in his pocket are abstract theories and a visualization that is not based on concrete evidence, not to mention that it is not measurable and comparable. However, despite the inability to reach a binding agreement, the two parties' views intersected and complemented each other in several axes, which reflected positively on the Arteta camp, which was a Yemeni self in a phone call in the near future confirming his access to the position. By the end of that meeting, Arsenal had finished meeting all 8 of the coaches' candidates, leaving only a recommendation to the board of directors represented by Stanley and Josh Kroenke. In a parallel timeline, Unai Emery announced in a press conference on the 27th of April 2018 that he would leave the ranks of Paris Saint-Germain as soon as the regular season ends. There were not many offers awaiting Unai. All that is on his table are 2 offers from Real Sociedad and West Ham. People close to Emery and several hints to the Spanish newspapers of the time were fully convinced of his return to Spain after fruitless experiences with Spartak Moscow and Paris Saint-Germain. The language problems that he encountered in Paris and Moscow were prompting those close to him to believe that he would not repeat the experience again in England, especially that he could not speak the language of the country well. Despite all these obstacles, Unai surprised everyone by traveling to London between May 8-11, 2018 by private plane, and landed at Luton Airport with his lawyer to meet with a mutual friend who has a close relationship with Raul Sanllehi. Emery, as it appears to the observer from the outside, had in mind the succession of David Moyes, but he was actually fully prepared for the position of coach at Arsenal. Despite not being on the initial list of 7 names, Emery was able to make his way to the candidate list thanks to one of the Spanish business agents close to Raul Sanllehi, who offered the Basque services in the form of asking the saliva of Don Raul, as one Spanish source metaphorically describes in his speech, with the Powerball bell. What was tempting for Raul Sanllehi was not the coach's curriculum vitae or what he is capable of achieving with the current group of players, but rather his acceptance of work in the midst of the modern club structure, which abolishes the traditional coach's role and strips him of most of his powers and potentials of power and influence and limits his role to be confined to the green rectangle and inside changing rooms. Raul did not hesitate for a while to tell Evan about Unai, and was quick to request a personal interview before the Basque coach's departure from London. Gazidis, who had hoped that the search for a successor to Arsene Wenger be legalized, did not object to the Fox request, and the date of the meeting was quickly agreed. Raul then notified Unai Emery personally, without any mediator, to inform him of the club's desire to talk to him soon. One of the English sources briefed on the content of the interview tells Arsenal's Bell. Unai Emery amazed and shocked all the attendees on the committee with the quantity and quality of information he had about Arsenal. Unai had a record of each player, strengths and weaknesses, his preferred position, levels in the club and the national team. The national, his optimal diet, detailed record of his injuries. Raul Sanllehi may have been the only man in the room who understood Emery's words, as the show was in Spanish, but the energy and enthusiasm with which he displayed the graphic content and videos that he prepared himself was enough to deliver a positive message, added the same source. There were some concerns about the weakness of Emery's English language and his ability to convey his accurate and deep ideas to the players, but at the same time there was optimism that this problem could be overcome by appointing a private language teacher and intensive daily lessons. After that enchanting interview, Emery became Raul Sanllehi's the man to go. Even Arteta's interview, which she followed about a week ago, did not shake that conviction. A prominent journalist in England speaking to the Arsenal Bell under the condition of anonymity confirmed that Sanllehi has taken it upon himself to bring Emery to Arsenal no matter what it takes. After the committee finished its interview with all the candidates, including Unai Emery, the clock ticked indicating the moment of decisive, the moment of voting for the name of the most impressive and deserving candidate to take the position. In Ivan Gazidis' initial leaks of his media doll, as described by one source, it was stressed that Arteta was the one chosen unanimously after a meeting with the board of directors. At the same time, there were two leaks by Raul Sanllehi to Sky Sports journalist Guillem Balag and the Marca paper newspaper that Unai Emery was chosen to succeed Arsene Wenger. What was clear and evident was that some of these leaks came early and somewhat proactive, and that the tripartite executive team was broken and not on consensus or unified vision. When the trio traveled to Atlanta to meet Stan and Josh Crony on May 20, 2018 to make the final recommendation, their choices were as follows. As an independent journalist revealed to Arsenal's Bell, Gazidis, Arteta, Sanna, Emery, Mizelentat, Ralph Rangnick. With the scattered recommendations, there were media assistants for the board of directors to make a decision, including a 100-page volume of the pros of each option along with video clips of interviews for the coaches. On the eve of that day, it was agreed that the club needed honest hands in the next stage, and that heading towards Arteta and Ralph might be exciting and renewed for the club, but the risk was greater than Stan wanted to bear. After that, the appointment of Unai Emery was approved, and he and his crew were contacted to invite them to meet the Kroenkes in America on Monday, May 21st. One of the sources tells Arsenal Bell, quoting a passenger on the plane in which Emery and his elite auxiliary crew were on board, their seats were reserved in the first-class trailer. These seats cost about £90,000 for a round trip. On Monday evening, the executive trio, accompanied by Unai and his crew, left for London in preparation for announcing him as a new coach for the club, and as soon as the crew landed in London, a senior source, believed to be Josh Kroenke, told David Ornstein that Emery was Arsene Wenger's successor, and the news was published at 9:45 p.m. This marks the start of a new era and a new chapter in the club's history. A member of Gazidis' inner circle revealed to the Arsenal Bell that the failure to appoint Arteta as coach under the pretext of insufficient experience was a deed of distrust from the Kroenke family, which was one of the main reasons that prompted him to seriously consider leaving the club despite being ahead of the scene at the inauguration conference of Unai Emery. AC Milan's tempting offer was the perfect excuse that Evan was looking for to leave Arsenal under the mantle of searching for a new challenge, while reality indicates the exact opposite, as he rejected two offers that were described as dream in Major League Soccer just a few months ago. He received the Rossinier offer. Since the departure of Gazidis, Raul Sanllehi has become the person with the highest influence and the greatest authority in every sporting decision, inside and outside the stadium, and this was first evident in the quality of the content broadcast on the club's official social media channels. In an exclusive interview with the Arsenal Bell under the condition of confidentiality in order to preserve his current job, he told us one of the administrators of the club's official accounts on Twitter said that the instructions were to come to them to highlight every positive change made by Unai Emery, whether it was strenuous training, enthusiasm, interaction with goals, or standing on the line of contact and directing players constantly. Sanna was closely following the fans' reactions when Emery was appointed, and it was not hidden from him that there was a discrepancy in the initial reactions and sympathy for what he saw with his own eyes during the personal interview of the advantages that the audience did not hear or see, as he felt that it was his duty to show little of that through official channels. Sanllehi did not have to wait long to prove that he was the undisputed number one in Arsenal. Since the first months there were cracks in the relationship with the Michelin-ships, who preferred to rely on the statistical and human side represented by the scouts in hiring players. Since the days of Barcelona, Raul was known for his unique network of relationships, whether with players' agents or club presidents, which helps him attract players even in the presence of competition from Real Madrid clubs. The approach adopted by each side should have been complementary, not alienating. In an idealized parallel world, Iceland would be tasked with compiling a list of players who would serve the Unai Emery philosophy. And then Sanllehi would employ his network of connections to obtain the named player. But unless it was taken into account that Milan's introverted and isolated personality did not help his popularity and reputation in the corridors of London colony, nor enabled him to withstand the power war with Raul, which forced him to submit his resignation, which Sanllehi did not try to dissuade or deter him from handing it over. After the departure of Gazidis and the resignation of Mesalentat, Raul Sanllehi became the crown prince of Arsenal, and some sources with whom Arsenal's Bell contacted claim that his influence now is almost as close to that of Arsene Wenger. Speaking of Unai Emery, in his first season he was immersed in learning the English language with his private club teacher, diversifying between English-speaking books and cartoons. Unai is also fond of Peaky Blinders, as he once stated in his press conference. Those efforts and endeavors to learn the language as quickly as possible were welcomed by everyone in the club, but that was not enough for Unai to master the skills of taking, responding and misleading if necessary in press conferences or television interviews, so his brother would only suggest imposing a temporary embargo on written texts of the UNAI conference cannot be published until the club issues its own text after revision and legalization, and then sends it to all newspapers. The club agreed to this request in an initiative to prevent the interpretation of what Emery, who is not yet fluent in the language, says, according to the whims of the journalists. The situation continued as it was for 5 months or more until the club saw a relatively improvement in the speed and spontaneous selection of vocabulary at Emery, so the temporary ban was dispensed with and journalists were allowed to transfer the Emery conference in writing without the need to wait for the club's revised text. Arsenal Bell learned that Emery was keenly following the conferences of Spanish coaches who had trained or are still training in the English Premier League, headed by Roberto Martinez, in an attempt to decode the codes of the English press and learn how to avoid questions that he does not want to answer intelligently and politely. After 18 months in London, Emery English seems to have stopped developing, or rather took a steep slope, as his words were barely understood and his sentences painstakingly translated into something meaningful. What was appreciated by the players a year and a half ago has become the subject of mockery, as we can confirm what journalist Miguel Delaney added in a report last month about some young players mocking the way the coach speaks some words. And even it came to calling him some titles as a joke, like "Por favor," in what appears to be a reference to the character Juan Cervantes from the series Mind Your Language, which depicts a Spanish student from Seville trying to learn English but does not understand much. Unai, despite his weak English, does not tire of trying. He is a character who sanctifies work and devotes himself to it, as described by those close to him in the book Unai Emery, the Maestro, and this is evident in his video sessions. These sessions last for nearly an hour, in which Unai presents the videos prepared in advance and took half a day to prepare them in a way that is easy for players to follow and study. These clips mostly deal with the opponent's strengths and weaknesses. Unai explains the 12-hour sap of his analysis of the opposing team's playing style and how to reduce its risk. First, the classes were fun, with a twist different from what was the situation under Arsene Wenger, who it's just 10 minutes of video lessons, and his first field training and squad strengths matter the most. After several months, however, the situation became monotonous and with difficult Emery language to understand, it was difficult for the players to bear this burden for a long time. A source close to the dressing room explained to the Arsenal Bell that the players asked the captain at the time to woo Emery and suggest that he reduce the length of these sessions. Emery was not stubborn but rather welcomed the idea of the lineup and reduced the video sessions to 30 to 40 minutes only. Unai Emery's experiences with his previous clubs should have honed his skills in dealing with the stars of the team, if they are called as such, but during his time with Arsenal, he quickly clashed with Mesut Ozil and Aaron Ramsey. After the Manchester City and Chelsea matches in his first season, which Arsenal lost 2-0 and 3-2 respectively. Unai held one-on-one talks in his office with each of them and told them frankly that their level was below what was expected, but he expected greater defense support, and in case he did not witness any development in their levels in the next matches, he will not hesitate to place them on the bench. Such an offensive speech did not have a positive response in the camp of players, who were upset with the threatening tone, as one journalist quotes the Arsenal Bell. Emery was on his promise and stopped the players for a number of matches, but he was forced to join them later after the results worsened, and his trick was to search for a way out of that distress. Aaron Ramsey was able to establish himself as a cornerstone of the Unai squad, taking advantage of his half-chances. And because not all heroic stories carry a happy ending, Aaron Ramsey's contract with Arsenal has reached the last 6 months, which means that he is authorized to speak with any non-English club and sign a binding agreement requiring his transfer without having to wait until the summer transfer window. Emery promised in his interview with Arsenal to build his squad around Aaron Ramsey, according to Sky Sports sources. Later on, however, it was discovered to Unai that Ramsey was not the material he could use to serve the team, as Ramsey's style of play contradicted Emery's vision of the style that Arsenal should follow. When Emery realized again the importance of Ramsey, it was too late, as Sanllehi decided definitively not to reward Aaron with a new contract due to his injury record, which makes the salary he wanted devastating for the club's future. According to David Ornstein, what Ramsey was asking for was no more than what the Mkhitaryan's received, that is, a salary of no more than £200,000 a week. Ramsey made the necessary efforts to stay at Arsenal, Sanllehi told the official website, but the club's view is that leaving Aaron for free is better in the long run than rewarding a generous contract. Aaron did not look back or fail to serve the team. Sources close to his agent David Baldwin tell Arsenal's Bell that he prejudiced a thigh injury in the last meters of the 2018 season and pushed his body's tolerance limits to the limit in order to restore the club to the Champions League before his departure to the ranks Juventus, but the injury was a time bomb waiting to explode at any moment. Indeed, in the absence of Ramsey, Arsenal's glamour was absent and he was unable to finish the league in the qualifying positions for the champions, and he could not beat the wounded Chelsea in the European League final. So his farewell to Arsenal was tasteless as he was unable to help the club return to where he belongs. Mesut Ozil was not more fortunate, so Emery's treatment of him was dry and cold, as if he had received instructions and support from the owner of the black suit to marginalize the German-Turkish role in his endeavors to make his life hell, as one source mentions, adding that the club seeks to get rid of the burden of the Maker Games by any means. The conflict between the two sides reached a climax in the final of the Europa League, when Ozil, who did not hide his anger and rage, was replaced when he replied, "By God, I am not the coach," towards Unai Emery more than once, according to Turkish reports in Sabah and Yeni Shafak newspaper. The treatment, which lasted until the 2019 season, saw the formation of parties in the changing rooms. A number of players have come to openly stand with Ozil against Emery's treatment of him with contempt. Others are timidly annoyed. Others are concerned about their basic bet and do not want to lose the coach's affection. The pressure of the crowd also made it difficult for Emery and put a heavy burden on him when she stood on Ozil's side by chanting his name inside and outside the Emirates Stadium. One of the press sources close to the camp of Mesut Ozil tells the Arsenal Bell that the player received hints about the coach's intention to throw him against Liverpool in the Carabao Cup with a group with reserves in order to appear at a disgraceful level that justifies Emery dropping him from the squads in the subsequent domestic league matches, but the level Ozil broke the thorn of the Basque coach. Aaron and Masoud weren't the only victims of Emery's pride. Lucas Torreira and Ainsley Maitland-Niles sipped from a similar cup as they were hired in roles that didn't suit them at all. Despite Ainsley's call and asking the coach to stop his involvement in the defense line several times, Unai did not pay him any attention. Sources close to the English young man claimed in her conversation with the Arsenal Bell that the player started attending psychological therapy sessions due to the pressures he was exposed to recently. The same sources point the finger of accusation at Unai and hold him fully responsible for what happened to him. As for Lucas Torreira, he paid dearly because he was not long enough to be a Canzonzi and a Fabinho or as skilled as he should be to emulate Banega. In the summer of 2018, when Emery met with the contracting team to determine the team's goals in the second window, he did not name specific players, but rather requested a specific profile. Two independent sources familiar with Emery's approach to transfer windows told Arsenal Bell that Unai likes to work with his old players and does not mind working with a sports director who identifies players who fit his philosophy, and that was consistent with his tenure with Seville and Paris Saint-Germain. The matter was not different at Arsenal, where he asked for a goalkeeper who was good at playing with feet and an average field, tall and elusive winger. The club could not fulfill its desires to the fullest due to the weak budget at the time, but overall the coach was satisfied with what the club bought him. In the summer of 2019, Torreira and his camp did not stop flirting with Italian football and life in Italy and the idea of playing again under the leadership of his former coach in Sampdoria and Milan coach at the time, Marco Giampaolo. Torreira's girlfriend, Vittoria Repetto, of Italian origin, was also pushing him to return there, under the pretext that she had not adapted to the atmosphere and the lifestyle in London. In a meeting with Sanllehi and Emery, the message was clear to Lucas: "We will not sell you." Then the Uruguayan club realized that there was no point in those groups and that he had to focus with Arsenal for another season. What made matters worse this season is Unai's treatment of Torreira. Sometimes he sees himself on the bench, and at other times he is employed as a fictitious striker or playmaker, and that is a source of discomfort, according to the player's latest statements of the player's agent, who did not conceal the possibility of his client leaving next summer if the situation continues as it is. Despite all of the events that raised questions in this article about Unai, the biggest question mark was by Stan Kroenke, Ken Fryer and Chips Kieswick when Josh made a suggestion from Raul Sanllehi and Vinay Venkatesham to renew Emery's contract in light of the good season, which has just passed. Josh's proposal was met with a unified rejection of the old guard, as one source contacted by the Arsenal Bell describes. The rejection was based on several factors, most notably the failure to reach the Champions League despite the availability of two opportunities in the hand in the local league and the European League. But that was not the only reason, as the absence of a clear playing style and the neglect of Hill and Academy graduates and the age groups and the confirmation of standards, the statistic that Luck had been an ally of Unai and his squad on more than one occasion in the 22-game no-loss streak was more than enough to sidetrack that proposal. Josh later met with Unai to inform him that the club had decided to escalate the academy coach Freddie Leonberg to his assistant staff to contribute to the vaccination of the starting lineup with the best young players he had worked with in recent years after it became evident to many within the club that Emery claimed to know him. Also, a sports director will be appointed, contributes to unifying the club's playing style at all levels, and although Emery, the club's first choice, was to sign Monchi, the latter refused in the last minutes the London club's offer when he requested Seville, as he did not hesitate for a while to answer that call. Some analysts believe that Monchi's refusal was a beneficial detriment to Arsenal, as the main goal of the modern structure is to treat the coach as a pawn on a chessboard no more, and that the appointment of Monchi will not serve that purpose as he is one of the most loyal people to Basque. Now, after shouts from inside the club's camp, with almost daily media leaks and requests from former club players and fans to leave Unai Emery after a disappointing series of results and levels, those close to him still trust his ability to change the situation. A spokesperson for the Spanish business agency IDUB that represents Emery tells Arsenal's Bell that Unai is extremely optimistic and positive, and that he has used the international break to rediscover himself and collect papers and prepare for the club's next match against Southampton. According to our information, the contract of Unai Emery, which he signed with Arsenal, carries a clause that allows the club to break its association without financial costs at the end of the current year in case it fails to qualify for the Champions League only. That may explain the reluctance of the decision-makers in Arsenal to pull the trigger and dismiss the coach now and pay one-year salaries half ahead of him, and his crew is relatively large. There are some unconfirmed murmurs that indicate that some in the club are pushing for the appointment of a person in the form of Zinedine Zidane, a successful former player who can impose his respect in the dressing room, can communicate in more than one language, has a stock of experience, an approach and a clear vision of how his team will play for football. In the event that these whispers are correct, the more important question remains searching for an answer.